Welcome. Pay attention immediately to the title, Conclusions Precede Decisions. We're glad you're joining us, but I want to take you right away to a thought-provoking image. Take a look at this picture of the lion and ask yourself a very important question. What does the image evoke in you? You may recognize the picture. It comes from the latest version of The Lion King. In fact, I was there with my daughter. But as you see this, ask yourself, what do you feel about that lion? What does it spark inside of you? Because those feelings fit into a rational framework, by the way, which is often employed by irrational people, but a rational framework that creates conclusions about the lion. And those conclusions will impact your behavior. I want to show you another image. This one is a bit more shocking. It's also a bit more realistic. Here it is. Now, if this picture creates a different set of feelings inside of you, bear in mind that it's also creating a different set of conclusions. More importantly, if you're asking, I just looked at a picture of a lion, then another, how does this relate to conversion and marketing? And the answer is, in every important way. In fact, if you were to say, what is the difference between the first version and the second version, I would tell you the difference is marketing. Because that glorious image that we saw of a lion on the left, that glorious image is only a projection of those attributes we admire most about the so-called king of the beast. But in the real version of the Lion King that happens every day in the bush, you may discover that that same lion looks just like the one on the right when he's in his predatory action set. Now, why is that critical? Because in truth, we might say that both pictures create a set of feelings that are somewhat justified. The lion is regal. And the lion is majestic. And the lion does stand for strength and other attributes. The lion represents an archetype in our societies, and it's been leveraged by authors like C.S. Lewis in his work on the Chronicles of Narnia. And you can see where the lion, and by the way, in that case, the lion represents God, in particular God in the form of the sun in sort of the allegory that is associated with C.S. Lewis's work. Do not think we're going to be too abstract today. Both of these images are correct, but the first almost creates inside of you a sense of awe. The first feels regal and majestic. But you'll notice the second one has a title that was taken from its Instagram post. It's viewed as a monster. Now, we could get into Carl Jung and talk about how in every human being there are these two components, and how we think about those components and how we view that human being depends on how their story is told. And we could go deeper into that and what Jung called individuation, but the marketer simply needs to know something very, very important. The actions that people take are grounded in decisions that they make, but those decisions are grounded in conclusions that they take. The conclusion produces the decision, and with that decision, we see the behavior. Data is about working backwards through the data traces, through the behavioral traces, into the decision and the conclusion. With that information, we can modify the conclusion in the same way that we can modify the way you feel by taking the same creature, the lion, and simply altering the way we create the observation set. What you're looking here is really an observation set, and it turns on zeros and ones, and it stimulates something inside of you. Now, as you're just thinking about that, I want you to see that on this screen, we are summarizing on a single page a year's worth of research inside of our laboratory. We've ran 20,000 plus path experiments. We have built, I think, the largest library in the world of case studies and experiments in our field. And I'm going to draw down from this learning and share some things with you today that could transform the results you're getting in your conversion. And to do that, I want to skip ahead, dip into an upcoming case study. So take a look, and you're going to see 3 sort of banners that are working on a website in 2 versions, a design A and a design B. Let me ask you, which one of these do you think will produce the highest conversion? Is it A or B? Now, I'm not coming to you live today, which I typically do, because we're still engaged in the studio. Once we get it all built, we'll invite some of you to come and connect with us. But for now, just look at this and imagine to yourself, if you were the marketer responsible for selecting the messaging that's going to go onto this web page, would you select A or would you select B? You must understand that everything you're looking at has everything to do with the 2 versions of the lion that we just saw. One will produce a response inside of you, and the other will produce a different response inside of you. And we can measure that with good science. And with that good science, we can set our creativity free to produce the most compelling hypotheses. I only have one more case study. We're going to unpack them using the whiteboard. I'm only taking right now from the new case study another comparison, and I'm asking you see A, see B, and select one or the other. Which pricing strategy produced better results? Now, as you think about that, you're creating inside of your own mind a learning space. And my job is to take our research and translate it into your results. And I can only do that using the bridge of your mind, and I must get inside of your mind and create the right question set and open you up for the learning. Otherwise, this is just another YouTube presentation, and it doesn't actually change your world. Done properly, understood properly, applied properly, we can impact your world in a very significant, very positive way. So then, let's get deeper into a case study. It's test protocol 11267. And it's a mid-sized furniture company selling mattresses. I've been approached this calendar year by a number, well, frankly, I think most of the top mattress brands asking, could they see our research? Could we help them solve a problem? This is an earlier experiment, and it comes from our classic library. And when they come from the classic library, I can share more details. Newer experiments, sometimes we have to protect the research partner so that we don't give away perhaps hard-earned trade secrets that results from the science. With this one, we can go deeper, and so we shall, and that's why we've picked it. And I want you to see essentially what we were trying to accomplish. So there is the page. These are both redesigns against a control. You can see a variable cluster test. We teach about that somewhere else. I can't get into it now. But we're changing multiple variables, but all clustered around the same hypotheses, which allows us to test faster, get bigger results, produce deeper meaning. Now, you can see the guarantee, warranty, and return tax policy. You can see the free shipping and the supportive media. Let's look at design B. It's different. And I'm going to drill down on these boxes in a moment. A promise is made. Try your mattress for 100 nights and sleep better, or your money back. There's a conversational question presented with a guarantee and reinforcement, and there's messaging directed at reducing customer anxiety. Now I'm going to put them side by side, and I'm going to ask you once again, with this new level of information, ask yourself which one of these will produce the highest response rate, the highest conversion rate. Because when we say response and when we say conversion or metanoia in the Greek, what we're really saying is a behavioral change that changes somebody from one stasis to another, from perhaps a prospect to a customer. And if you understand conversion in that way, you can see its application to every area of your life, to winning a promotion, to getting the next job, to getting that campaign to produce greater than it ever has in the past, to communicating more effectively with your teenage child, or teenage, I don't know if child is the right word, but you know what I'm saying. My point is, this is a profound understanding that if you lock into, you can apply into many other places. Now, when I say profound, I'm profoundly confused about a lot of things. So don't let that come across as if to say, we have brilliant answers that you need to hear. We're on a journey, you and I, this audience, my team, myself. The only empire I want is in the mind. I'm not interested in a giant company. I'm not even interested in a giant YouTube audience. I only want the right people on. Now, with that said, if there are people here that can learn, invite them. If they would participate in our community, bring them and share and like the video. But just scaling an audience, it's just not enough. You and I as a teacher, and you even in your business, we need to find the right people, get the right message in front of them at the right time. And scale is a dangerous goal that may blur your vision and hurt your ultimate meaning and significance. Well, how does that apply to this? How does that apply to two lions? Let me ask a different question. What does a bloody lion, a mattress website, and a tiered pricing model, what do all three of these have in common? And how does the combination of the three help you and I learn something today that could transform our results? While you're thinking about the answer, let me guide you towards it by looking a little bit further at what we have. So ultimately, what you're really doing is seeing three sort of communication spaces. And in those communication spaces, think of them as points in a dialogue. We are employing two separate hypotheses, two separate communication strategies, and it becomes clear when we show them side by side. So to get deeper value out of the time you're spending with me right now, you need to really look at this slide. You need to ask yourself, what's the difference between the two approaches? Now, as you ask that, I want to try to help you to understand something. And that one thing will guide everything that we do in the balance of our remaining time. So, in the balance of our time, take a look now then at the way the first, and I am looking at two boxes, and I'm going to talk about the first one. It says three things: 100-night comfort exchange, 25-year warranty, 100-night return policy. Now, go to the right. Try your mattress for 100 nights and sleep better, or your money back. Do you know which one of these will work better? It may not be apparent, but the next one, that is the next box, the next banner, free shipping, try it for 100 nights, and then this other sort of approach on the right, not sure if a botanical bliss is right for you? Why not sleep on it? 100 night money back guarantee. The B version is following the same psychological model as the banner above, the try your mattress for 100 night banner. So, though they look different, there's a similar strategy, a uniform hypothesis that applies to each side of this equation of the design A and the design B approach. Now, when you think about that, let's unpack it. First of all, which one do you think will work best? Well, I'm going to share that with you in just a moment. But let's nail down the strengths and weaknesses of the first banner. That's the top banner across both design A and design B. Now, the top banner does not use a single sentence to communicate meaning, but bear in mind, it is not a headline either. That approach as a headline has failed every time I've tried it. It is on a page at a certain point in the sequence of thought, and so the marketer is taking the risk of communicating in a different way. So the weakness is it doesn't communicate in a single fluid, complete thought, like the form of a sentence, even if it's an understood subject. On the other hand, design B does that. Try your mattress for 100 nights and sleep better. There's even a potential promise there, and or your money back. Which one works better? Well, let's talk about the weakness of B compared to A. B is conversational, but it also is so informal, it doesn't look as credible. Because it's not important enough that I just understand your message. And this is where I'm going to start to unpack the two approaches of the banner and explain how it connects to a lion. In the one approach, let's take design B, top banner, you're achieving clarity. Now, in the design A approach, so I'm going to put B here, the way it's laid on the page feels like it's an official policy of the business. And so in a certain way, you're achieving credibility. And I am only going to abbreviate. So clarity, by the way, is not a condition. Do you hear me? It's a conclusion. Until it's a conclusion, the fact that it's a condition doesn't matter. If it's clear, it doesn't matter unless I conclude I understand it. The condition of clarity is insufficient. It's necessary, but insufficient. You must go beyond the condition to the conclusion. The conclusion is deep inside, even at a subconscious level, I understand it. And it's very fast. We tend to dwell on that conclusion more when we don't understand it. It amplifies its impact on the conscious mind, and whereas when we do understand it, it's subsumed into it. In fact, great writers tell you that the writer should disappear in the work. I agree. C.S. Lewis was one of those great writers. Now, backing up, that's clarity. But the credibility thing, again, credibility is a condition. Can be externally monitored, but it's not the external let's say evaluation that matters. It's the internal conclusion that matters. Credibility is best understood as I believe it. Now, if you've trained with us on the value proposition, you know a lot about this, but I'm not going there today. This is not what I've taught in the past. If you want to understand the value proposition, go to our playlist. I took a 12-week course and summarized it in 1 hour. And we may put a link to that here somewhere so that you can watch that piece and learn from it. I can't teach it right now, or we won't get the payoff for today's energy investment. Instead, I want to point out that both of these are necessary. And with the Design A, 100-night comfort exchange, 25-year warranty, 100-night return policy, you're dealing with a mind that's already been trained to understand that so easily. We encounter it so many places that we might conclude that it is possibly sufficient enough. So if B wins on clarity and A wins on credibility, we might also say it may be sufficient on clarity. If it is sufficient, we're going to see that it is better than the other because it is both clear enough and more credible. Let me test it in a different way. Suppose I tell you something very clearly, but you don't believe it. Does the fact that I was clear matter very much at all? Not really. On the other hand, suppose I tell you something and it's both clear and you believe it. Well, you can see that's better. But we don't really see how to arbitrage the difference until we take it a step further. So watch this with me. One is sufficient, or at least necessary. It requires both of these to get a conclusion, but which is preeminent? Here's where I'm going, can I believe it before I understand it? No. So there is a sort of preeminence, even though both are required. First, I must understand it. Only then can I believe it. If I understand it and I believe it, you can win. Now, because our time is limited, I could take all three of these on the right. They strive for clarity and a conversational tone. What you often teach is the very best approach. However, those on the right are clear enough, but they have additional impact on the I believe it conclusion because of the way they're structured, because of the language choice, and even the visuals. I'll give you an example just so you understand before I show you the results. Not sure if a botanical bliss is right for you? Well, you're asking a question. I came with a question. Don't bother me with your questions. Don't think that I identify with that. That just sounds like sales language. You wasted that sort of tone and meaning approach on words, on a phrase that isn't actually advancing your cause in terms of the micro yeses and conversion. Why not sleep on it? There's another useless question. If you just tell me with 100, look here, free shipping, try it for free 100 nights. That actually communicates more value. What is it really implying? It's applying a sub-conclusion, and I'm getting technical, but if you learn from this, you can see it. Remember, I'm going to put this together. I'm going to show how it impacts pricing. I'm going to relate it to the lions. Stay with me. Well, the free shipping says to me, I really can try it for free because A, I can return it in 100 nights, but I'm not even going to lose the cost of shipping. Now that then adds double impact to the conclusion and its meaning in my mind. Well, where does all this go? I'll tell you, it's fascinating. Before the internet, we didn't have a digital way we could see into millions of decisions and pattern them. Do not think of the internet as a channel. It is a living laboratory. It is the greatest breakthrough in the history of the world when it comes to understanding how people make choices. And I've spent 30 years asking one question: why do people say yes? And here's a glorious example using science to understand life, and in particular, it's life in commercial application. So here we go. There's the difference. Design A, because it is understood enough, so I understand it, but it is believed more. We posit, that's the reason, produces a 167% increase. Now, if you are one of those unusual people that I'm trying to find in this community, your mind is now racing at 100 miles an hour. You're not just thinking about 167%. You're starting to think about implications for all of your communication. You're wondering how it could impact the headlines, your calls to action. You're wondering how it could impact other areas in your life. So many times when I teach, people say, wait a second, this applies to every area of my life. It does. It's the primary reason we began to study it in our research program. I'm more interested in spiritual values than I am in just commercial values. And when you get the one right, the other tends to follow. Stay with me, because I got an interesting experiment to connect to this one. I think you should come away here when you're trying to summarize what you've learned from this, is that we want to achieve a certain conclusion about you, just like a conclusion about the lion. People make a conclusion about you before they do about your offering. So there's two parts to this process. I'm going to put them on the board. As they observe, and that happens as they interact with your site, let's just leave this to a landing page, but it's also true of a television commercial. It's also true of a lecture. It's true in the science community when you're trying to get people to believe your latest hypotheses, or at least to believe in the value of your work. Science is marketed. Never forget that. And I'm not the first to say it. Read Thomas Kuhn, and there's a wonderful article on the subject that just blew my mind by someone who saw through all the posturing and realized, wait, this is just marketing. But come back with me here. They make a conclusion about you and then about your offering. It's very hard to separate the conclusion one from the other. If I conclude you're dishonest, that impacts my thinking about your offering. If I conclude you exaggerate, that influences my conclusion about your offering. And in fact, human beings are wired through their biology to make conclusions about a person very fast. What we can do with the subtle signs on a human face baffles scientists to this day. So much is communicated in an expression that it's stunning. And in a situation where I'm not sure about the offering, I'll fall back on the area that I am most sure about, and that's my conclusion about you. If you run up to me on the street with a trench coat on and offer to sell me a Rolex watch, and you open up your coat and it's full of Rolex watches, and you speak in a conspiratorial tone to me, and you look to the left and the right, I'm doubting those watches are really Rolexes. But watching the way you behave is confirming my suspicion, because I first make a judgment about you before I do about the watch. So we saw a lion. At any given point, that lion could look like picture A or picture B. When we emphasize picture A, we create a different set of conclusions inside of you, which produces a different set of decisions. I don't think, for instance, you're going to look at the second image and say, wow, I've got to show my 4-year-old. This is an amazing picture of a lion. But we crammed theaters to see the cartoonized version of a lion. And by the way, most all biographies are cartoons. And half of what I hear in marketing is cartoons. It's two-dimensional when it should be three-dimensional. And because it is flat and two-dimensional, it doesn't really capture the truth or the reality. Now, I watched Lion King with my little boy. He's now 26, doing courses at Harvard and coming back from Thailand tomorrow. But when I watched Lion King, it was a cartoon, two-dimensional. When we watched the theater, it was three-dimensional. But the story is two-dimensional. That's okay. We're using the story to communicate something of value about family and all of these things. I'm not criticizing the Lion King. I'm trying to help you understand that a master marketer can take the same lion and pick two different points in his own life story and present him in two different ways, produce two different sets of conclusions, and produce a different set of decisions and a different behavior. We're going into political wars right now. The other side is trying to control the observations so they can control your conclusion about that candidate. It's as old as mankind itself. And there's nothing in this lab I want to study with you that won't apply to 1,000 years from now and wouldn't have been valuable 1,000 years ago. I may get that wrong, but I'm not interested in fads. I'm interested in the depths of human nature. So then, let's get more practical. Let's apply it to presenting your price. Our time is running out. There's your big win. Here's a new case study. Test protocol 11074. Software as a service. There's a membership. A lot of this today. Everybody wants you to comply with the recurring revenue model, even if it doesn't make sense. But here we go. This is a pricing approach that offers 4 tiers and, per MECLABS methodology, it emphasizes one tier over the other, which sounds like you're applying what we might have taught in MECLABS 10 years ago, but it really isn't. Because the way you're emphasizing price, you're just emphasizing the first one, and you're giving no reason why I would actually value that over the other 3. So while you think you're helping me, here's what you're really doing. You're putting me off. I look at it and think, oh, of course, you want me to take the most expensive. So if I put it in blue and make it a little bit more dominant, that's the marketer's thinking. Maybe more people will opt for that. That is not the way we intended to teach this principle years ago. It is important to weight one option, but make sure that option that's being weighted makes sense in the communication of its value proposition. There is no value proposition here. The marketer assumed that was accomplished earlier in the process. Big mistake. But that's not what I want to dwell on. I want to show you something strange, weird, something that may cause you to think twice about how you're positioning price in the future. There is the approach, and I can give you one number. I'll write it on the board. Everything about the second approach is based on this number. So, the goal here for this organization was to get a lot more subscriptions. What's their plan? Let's discount the price. 22% now. You're looking at a treatment. Everything's identical, but the pricing. The big difference here is that the pricing's been dropped by 22% all the way across the board. And as you can see the difference in price, the question you might ask is, well, what one will produce the greatest conversion rate? Oh, this is all about lions, bloody lions and majestic lions. It's all happening the same way on this page. You are showing me a set of observations, and that set of observations, i.e. those 2 pictures of the lions, are producing a conclusion, and the conclusion is influencing a decision. But what's really happening? Well, I will tell you this. There's a fulcrum going on, and there's an approach here that someone just took. I've taught the fulcrum, but if you see it now, with me, I'm going to use the fulcrum to unpack what's happening beneath the surface, deep in the mind. So I'll erase all of this, and I'll simply say, here's the marketer's task. For those of you that are new, this is the first time you'll see this, but for those of you that have seen it, bear with me, because I'm going to take it to a new place with you. Here's the fulcrum. Imagine that we have this fulcrum. Think of it like a seesaw. And on this side, I have, we'll make that different. On this side, I have perceived cost. On this side, I have perceived value. Now, obviously, that fulcrum needs to extend so that we're at the same exact leverage point. One day, I'll teach what happens when you move that. When you move that, you change context. It's magical. I've never taught it. In the last 30 years, I haven't taught it yet. Still doing research. But I want to talk to you right now. Imagine this is even. Perceived cost. It's tilted, not at all, because right present, they're equal. And when it's equal, you're losing. If perceived cost and perceived value are the same, you're losing. Now look at the subscription. Right now, there is almost no value, only cost on the page. But don't think that cost is price. Did you hear me? Cost is not price. Cost includes every negative that would factor against your decision to purchase. It could be risk. It could be a fear that you're not going to be able to cancel easy enough. It could be fear that the product's going to be disappointing. It could be fear that you're not paying a fair price. There's a lower price somewhere. There's all of these other factors that weigh in on the negative side of the fulcrum. And as they weigh in, they tilt it downward, downward, downward. And when it tilts downward, Conversion also goes down and you lose. Now, you've heard me teach this, and I'll say it again because it's going to apply to this lesson, but there's only two ways to tilt this fulcrum. It's physics. If you're tracking with me, you might arrive at those on your own before I say them. Imagine the fulcrum, evenly weighted. What tilts it to the left or tilts it to the right? Only two moves. This is not philosophy, this is physics. You can take weight off of one side or you can add weight to another side. Now, if you're following that, I want you to follow the logic of this. We did not reduce cost in terms of people's friction or anxiety with the new version of this page. All we did was reduce the price. And there's a difference between reducing price and reducing cost. When you reduce price without cost, you create an inverted, hear me, this is the point. It may not make sense yet, but I'm going to say it and then I'm going to explain it. You created an inverse impact on perceived value. In fact, you confirm their suspicions, which is a bad move. It's one of the reasons newspapers all over the world have gone out of business. It's another reason those that are thriving because they learned that discounting your way into a customer is a dangerous, even deadly practice. They learned, this is, say, the Boston Globe, who we've worked with for many years, and the New York Times, who we worked with for more than a dozen years. When you add perceived value, it changes everything in that fulcrum as it exists in the mind of a prospective customer. But let's look at what happens here. Here, all we did is throw some weight off of the price, and we hope by throwing weight off of the price, we would win. This is the lazy marketer's way. I'm not going to go back and communicate value more effectively. I'm just going to lower the price. So across the board, we lower the price by 22%. What happens? Well, I shall show you by calling your attention to the slides, and let's see. Whoa! Is this good or is this bad? I'm asking you that question. It's clearly a 19% improvement. And wouldn't you expect that? We just lowered the cost. But we lowered the cost with no what we call PVD, no differential between perceived value and actual value. That's a dollar for dollar drop. It was this number, now it's this number. That 22% cost me 22%, and it gives you 22%. There's no difference to arbitrage. If I gave you a special video that you were attracted to, it might cost me $2 and feel like it's worth $29, and the difference could be arbitrage to tip the fulcrum. But since we did not do that, all we did was impact people's equation in their mind when it comes to the price and it comes to the promise. On the left hand is the promise, and that's what produces perceived value. On the right hand is the price, and that's what produces perceived cost, and we diminished it by 22%. So did it work? Did we make money? The answer is no. No. Because total revenue in the test dropped by 9.7%. Now, if you focus on that small amount of dollars, if you focus on anything except what I'm going to say next, you may miss the point of all this. Discounting the price just confirms the prospect's suspicion that you're not worth as much as you're saying. When you approach the problem in a different way, when you learn how to change the picture of the lion, and people thus change their conclusions and thus change their decisions, which is the same as saying their behavior. If their behavior doesn't change, it wasn't a real decision. If the decision and the behavior align as a difference, then you've achieved metanoia, which is called conversion, a change of stasis. They're no longer a prospect, they're a customer. But it happened then by improving their perception of value. Here, all that was done is we confirmed their negative evaluation of our offering. Now, I was teaching at the Boston Globe, and I say this only as a compliment, and particularly to Peter Doucette, who's no longer there, but probably is the most brilliant newspaper marketer, I think, that I know of anywhere in the world. You should find Peter, or reach out to us and we'll help you find Peter if you need to. I'm just sharing that with you because I worked with him for many years at the Globe, and he ran all of this testing program. But what Peter was able to do with his team just before he left the Globe was raise prices by 74%. When newspapers everywhere else are discounting to $1, trying to get you somehow into their funnel. I saw that with the biggest newspaper in Canada. We worked with them, but their only strategy up until that point was discount, discount, discount. Discounting is not a strategy in most cases. It's a concession. That's a difference. That concession costs you more than you may know. But while other newspapers discount, the Globe raised prices 74%, and they raised prices 74%. Why? Because they got the picture of the lion right. What do you mean? Well, whatever picture I show you of a lion is going to produce a certain sort of impact inside of me or you, the stochastic sample that I'm trying to reach with my marketing. That same could be said for this choice of words on the banners that we saw in the early experiment. The same can be said for the way we approached the discount methodology here. Ultimately, until you truly know how to increase the perceived value on this side, be very careful about a price reduction strategy. Indeed, I'll just take this one step further and I'm going to close this out. Over here, if we can influence what they see, and we call that observations, then we can influence what they conclude, and we call that conclusions, and then we can influence what they decide, and we call that decisions. And when we influence that, we are ipso de facto influencing behavior, and we will call that conversions. That is the point of today's session. When I teach the next session, I'm not certain yet, but I think I'm going to be unpacking an FBI hostage and kidnapping negotiation to show you how one brilliant agent marketed his way out of a disaster, of a crisis. And by the way, it is as applicable to your web pages as anything else you'll ever read, because it comes down to understanding what happens in the mind. Do not optimize your website. Do not optimize your landing page. Optimize the sequence of thought. See beneath the page, into the mind, transform the perception of value, and watch your conversion rate get amplified.